we hear so many times, couples saying, he just doesn't understand me, or she just doesn't get me, or it's just so hard because we can't see eye to eye in these situations. And again, all of this is pointing back to the differences and the similarities within inside of a marriage
Yeah.
relationship. And that's so relative to like, iPhones and Samsung, iOS and Androids. And they're totally two different systems, but
Yeah.
somehow in our world today, we have learned how to make those two systems, those two phones work and sync and work together. You're listening to the Favorite Marriage Podcast, a place where you and your spouse can experience God's favor on your forever. Join us as we explore relevant topics and provide practical tools for your marriage toolbox. Enjoy this week's episode of The Favorite Marriage. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Favorite Marriage Podcast. We are your hosts, Monty and Jeannine Mora, and this is your go-to podcast for couples who want to gain marriage tools for their marriage toolbox. And so we're glad you're tuning in for another episode. We're going to be talking about a subject today that every single married couple encounters, and that's this idea of differences in marriage.
Right.
All right. So we've titled this episode, He's iPhone, She's Samsung. So I'm team iPhone. I like the sleekness of the phone. I love how all of my devices sync up together. I like the simplicity of it, and that's why I'm team iPhone.
Yeah, he tried to get me to turn over to iPhone when he did, and I just can't. I'm used to my Samsung. I love the Android operating system. It gives you a lot of options. I love to personalize things, and I'm just used to it. So there was no way I was trading.
I tried to get her to switch over, but she
So
likes her Samsung.
Team Samsung.
Yeah, for sure. This is going to be a fun episode because this is kind of like when we speak in the topic of marriage differences. This is so relative to so many different marriages. And when we talk about differences, the big thing is learning how to just navigate each other, in
Right.
marriage on the differences that we have and as well as our similarities.
Right. And that's a very important thing to recognize that God created us different, right? We are totally different physically. This was his idea. It was his idea to make husband and wife so different. So it's really important for us as husband and wife to recognize those similarities and differences. And, it's just because we're different doesn't mean we're wrong, right? We like to say, not wrong, just different.
Just different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's in the words of Dr. Eggerichs. Remember in the Love and Respect, he said that a lot.
Right.
And so definitely not wrong, just different. Now in the context of marriage, right? There are so many differences within the marriage, and the idea is learning how to appreciate, or should I say respect, the differences, but also appreciate our similarities in the marriage relationship. And we hear so many times, couples saying, he just doesn't understand me, or she just doesn't get me, or it's just so hard because we can't see eye to eye in these situations. And again, all of this is pointing back to the differences and the similarities within inside of a marriage relationship. And that's so relative to like, iPhones and Samsung, iOS and Androids. And they're totally two different systems, but somehow in our world today, we have learned how to make those two systems, those two phones work and sync and work together.
Yes.
In the real world and also within the context of marriage.
For sure. It breaks my heart when people say, we're just too different. We're never going to get along and we can't make this work. Because like I said before, our differences are God created. And so when they say that, they're just saying they're not willing to work through those differences and come to a place where you can make those differences benefit one another, enhance the relationship, looking at each other's strengths and helping, your spouse with their weaknesses. It's just like a puzzle. We fit those differences together to help nurture the marriage.
Yeah. And in along with those differences come challenges as well.
Of course.
I mean, when we talk about like this idea of, hey, we as a couple need to agree, agreement. Agreement does not mean sameness. And it's not like I have to be the same as you. You have to be the same as me. We just have to learn how to agree together with our differences and our similarities. Now, think about like the Samsung and the iPhone, right? The iOS operating system and the Android operating system. Two different companies, two different interfaces, two different ecosystems, two different user experiences, right? All these differences. And that has come with a lot of challenges. Just our phones have created some challenges between us. For example, the swipe action on the iPhone, right? Do you remember when you took my phone, you're trying to figure out how to get to apps, and I'm like, you got to swipe up and then move it over, and then you'll see all the apps, and you're like, you got frustrated a little bit.
Well, and that just comes with when you're so used to doing something day in and day out on your device, and then you pick up an iPhone, and it's like, how do you work this thing? and it's so simple. After you showed me, it's like, oh, that's all you do. But I still prefer my comfortability and knowing how to get to apps and close out apps and go back to apps.
That's a big one too. And I wish the iPhone can have that back button, because I really do appreciate that on the Samsung phone that I have. But I've learned it so much now to where I'm used to how to use my device to where it's now comfortable for me. And it's the same for you.
Right. So some of the differences can be really minor, right? Like thinking about marriage, like some of our differences when we got married, they were minor differences. They were kind of funny. We chuckled about them here and there. But some of those differences were simple things like the way we washed our white clothes. And you prefer to start with cold water. And I was like, no, you need to use hot water. I think of just the other day when we were making the bed, you still make the bed different than I do when it comes to the top sheet and the blanket and folding it over. And you just choose to put it the wrong way. And
I think it's the right way.
No, because when you get in your bed, you're supposed to have like the sheet, the right side on top of your body. So it's things like that. So yes.
So I'm confused because like when you never mind.
Yeah.
So what about, and this was a funny one because when we were first married, the way we folded towels, I fold towels. And even to this day, after 30 years of marriage, I'll look in the closet and there are towels that are folded your way and towels that are folded the right way.
Yeah. Well, I think I fold towels differently. I caught myself doing this the other day. Like I was folding them one way and then I picked up another one and I fold it. And so the way we do things tends to rub off on one another and then it just becomes okay.
Yeah.
So I caught myself doing that the other day and I thought, I have some folded one way and some folded the other way. You know what? The towels are folded and they're put in the closet and they're good.
And the towels are washed, or the clothes are washed, and the dishes are washed. Yeah. We've made it work after 30 years.
Yeah.
But
those are the little things.
Yeah. But it's so funny. Like I said, after 30 years of being married, there are still these blaring differences, but we've learned how to make them work. And which is interesting about like the iPhone and the Samsung. We talked about they're two different phones, two different operating systems, but those two companies have created apps to where those two apps can now sync up and work together, right? So you think of like, for us, the Google Calendar.
That's important.
It's important. We talk about
two different phones, same calendar. We can see what's happening in our everyday life.
Yep. Google Maps, so all these different, there are main applications, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all these things, they share apps together. And so even companies have learned how to work together and make it easier for society. And in the same way in marriage, as a married couple, we have to learn and grow and put in the hard work to where, how do we sync up our two apps, right? Like the app of love or the app of communication or the app of intimacy, right? So we have two different apps, but we have learned as a married couple to sync them together, and they interface with one another. They interconnect with each other. And I think that's the neat thing, not only just in technology, but that's the beauty, the beauty of the journey of marriage. Right. Year after year, you learn how to come to an agreement and work together in all these different areas in our own lives.
And how do we do that? We go to the creator of us, our manufacturer, God.
That's good.
And we ask him, like, Lord, you made this man in front of me. You made this woman. And ask him to help each other, one another, to learn those differences and to be able to make those. Sometimes there are sacrifices on your own part to bend and to lean towards your spouse in their differences and come to an agreement. And there's some things that might have to change, and one will lean towards the other. There's things that we've changed in our marriage that you've leaned my way, and there's things in our marriage I've leaned your way. But then there's those things that it is okay that we are just different, and we don't want to change those things in one another.
Yeah. How boring would our marriage be if we were both the same? Like if there was two Jeannines in this marriage or two Montys, I mean,
we'd be in trouble.
We would be in big trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love this scripture, one in 1 Peter 4:10, that also helps us with that. Where it says, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. So gifts, personalities, ideas, thoughts, all those things, we come from a creative God. He is very creative, and he's created things in us that we will just need to learn to accept, and not just accept, but champion one another in those things, and your gifts that you have. I applaud you. I encourage you, and you do the same for me. And because we have recognized that those are God given, any couple that I witness or we see in public or in, just conversating with them, and if you ever notice someone trying to quiet, that's for lack of a better word, quiet the other spouse, and like just try to change them or make them feel like that the way they're acting, they're talking, is not okay. I always cringe at that, because it's like, oh, but that's just them.
That's their unique.
Yeah. And so it breaks my heart when I see that, because God's created us to be who we are, and the personality that we've developed, those God, unless they're characteristics that have been ruled by the flesh, right? But I'm just talking about just who you are as a person. And if you're someone who just, loves the Lord and is following hard after him and seeks every day to, have the fruit of the Spirit, be fruitful, then you're doing the right things. You're doing the right things, and don't ever let anyone try to quiet you. That needs to be a conversation that you guys have as husband and wife, if you're feeling like you're being quieted.
Yeah. Those gifts, those differences, those personalities, those are all works of the Creator inside of us. And in some cases, the temptation for one spouse is to try to change the other spouse, the spiritual DNA of how that God created that person. And that breeds a lot of frustration if you're doing that. Like you talk about quieting or throwing a wet blanket over the fire and the passion of that other spouse. And so, and also we got to be careful in this context, because the way God made us, the way God created us in his image, the way God wired me, like they say, paint with the colors God's given you. God's
Yeah, I
given
like
you a
that.
palette of colors, and I have to appreciate that. I get to appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And God's given me a palette of colors, and I'm wired in such a way to where I have these ways about me. And so for us to want to try to change each other, we have to be careful, because then we're challenging the creation of God in that spouse. And we don't want to do that. It's more about appreciating those things.
Well, there's also, just to clear, this conversation we're having up, there are things in us that are of the flesh and like our bad habits that
Of course,
that
yeah.
of course we would help each other work out of, and that's not what we're talking about. Those are things that you will work out, as you draw closer to God and ask him for help, and then your spouse as an accountability partner. Those things you'll grow out of those. But we're talking about like just who you are as a person,
Sure.
personality, quirks,
Mm-hmm.
just being silly. If you're quiet or you're introvert, you're an extrovert, all those things that the Lord designs you to be.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm glad you clarified that. Going back to Team iPhone and Team Samsung, right?
Mm-hmm.
Operating systems. iPhone's iOS, Samsung is Android.
Yep.
Husband, man, Monty,
Mm-hmm.
I have an operating system. There's a system of the way I operate
Yeah.
as a man, and you have your operating system
Yep.
as a woman. And those systems are so different. And again, going back to God Creator,
Mm-hmm.
He's made us that way. He's created us in that way. Now, you think about the marriage parallel between the operating systems of two phones. The iOS system is very structured. It's a closed ecosystem. Samsung is it's an open system, and there's variety, and you can add there's flexibility with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the marriage parallel is, in marriage, some couples or some individuals or one spouse will like the structure of something. They need structure to operate well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give me the boundaries, give me the structures, give me the template, give me the rubric, and then I can fit in that, and I operate good in that.
Yeah.
Others are like, I don't want no boundaries. I don't want no rubric. Can't even spell that, right? And you want me to, and just let me operate.
Free.
Yeah, and free flexibility and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, which are you?
I am. It's weird because I definitely like my freedom, flexibility, just to be able to, move from one thing to the other if I want to, or change things. But part of me also needs structure. That's why I feel like if I did have enough peer pressure to transfer over to the iPhone, I think I could be okay. But I lean more towards the
Okay.
flexibility.
The flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So let's frame this in the context of marriage even deeper. Let's take parenting styles.
Yeah, that's
Operating
a big
systems.
one.
Okay.
That's one that we hear a lot about when we sit across tables from couples is that parenting style. You and I, that was one of our bigger challenges that we had to overcome. And I don't even know if we ever came to a place where we did it well.
Yeah.
We survived, and our kids survived, and they're doing good. So God's grace.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came from a very structured family. I don't know if I would use the word structured, but very more that authoritative of parenting.
Yeah.
So I was used to rules and expectations, and I had to follow them and abide by them. And when I didn't, there was punishment. There was consequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And mine was totally different. There was a lot of passivity in my home with parenting, with mom raising 6 of us. And I just think she didn't have the time to try to deal with all of us little rambunctious kids, the Morai clan. So there was a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility, a lot of passiveness. And so when we got married, we carried that into our parenting style in our marriage relationship. So I operated on a more of a passive, hey, it's cool, just they'll be fine, let them just fight it out, they'll be okay. And there was this lot of permissibility from my perspective, and that's how I operated, because that's how I was raised, and yours was totally different. Yeah.
And again, not wrong, just different. Your family had a different dynamic, and y'all did what you had to do to get through childhood and teenage years into adulthood. I know that your siblings helped a lot with, bringing you up and raising you, because, mom had to do what she had to do. So not wrong, just different. So when we brought these two parenting styles together, there was a lot of butting heads. There was a lot of tears, I know, on my part, because I always felt like I was the bad guy. And sometimes I felt like the kids hated me and loved you. But I also look back and I think, well, there were some things that both of us, we could have leaned towards. You could have leaned more towards my way, and I could have leaned towards more your way. And there were circumstances that we did that. Yeah. I think as an overall structure, I think we never got there, but we definitely found ways that worked. When we got to a place where it's like, okay, this works for this child and this works for this child, and we parented differently as well. I mean, poor Caleb, he was the one that we were learning on, and then came Jared, and then Jared was a whole different child, so it was just like we had to learn all over again, almost, it felt like. And then Janice,
and then we get a daughter, and that's a whole nother learning system.
Didn't even like say boo, and she'd cry. It's like, so the parenting is challenging because each child is different, so you have their differences. So we really challenge you out there who have children in the home. Get together and really come into an agreement of how you are choosing to parent. There's no wrong way, the way each one of you were brought up, just different ways. But as a home, as a husband and wife raising children, you create the new parenting style that you need to do for your home.
And it goes back to the differences of also communication. There has to be some solid communication up front, which is critical for husband and wife, especially in the context of parenting, is you have to have some agreements in how you're going to parent, because you identify, yes, we have two different parenting styles based upon how we were raised. So we really need to communicate and talk about how we're going to navigate and raise these little ones in our own home, and make it work for us and our family. And I think that's what we did. We made it work. We weren't experts at it. We don't have a degree in family and parenting. By the grace of God, we made it work, and our kids are alive.
They're doing well.
Yeah, they're alive.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Another operating system I think of was when we came together in marriage, our families, just the dynamic of our families, and us learning the in-law role, like how you had to adapt to like the Ayala Martinez side, and I adapted to the Mora side. There was just differences in the way we did things, the way we celebrated. And then there were some things that were very much the same. Yeah. And those were the easy ones to work through. Yeah. But we can do a whole nother podcast on balancing time with in-laws. And
we did a podcast on in-laws just a few episodes ago. Yeah. Go back and take a peek at that if you want to learn more about that dynamic there.
Yeah. Integrity Fence is your hometown team for fencing. I'm former Bronco Mark Jackson, and I know you'll score every time with Integrity Fencing. Call today to hear about their new automatic security gates for your business, or visit integrityfence.com.
Well, as you all know, in marriage, there's no one size fits all. Each marriage is uniquely different. Obviously, there are a lot of similarities that we have as a married couple, but I think the important thing as a married couple in this episode is we want to encourage you as a married couple, learn how to stay synced up. Learn how to sync your hearts, your mind, your spirits, your souls, your bodies together so that you can be more compatible, more conducive, more healthy and stronger, even as a married couple, even with all of your differences and your similarities.
Respect each other's differences, right?
Yeah. And appreciate their similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not wrong, just different.
Just different.
You see blue, I see pink, and those things are what makes us beautiful. God created us so different. And if the creator of heaven and earth created us to be different, we should lean into that. Ask him for wisdom so that we can honor and glorify him in our differences.
Yeah. Well said. Well, as we wrap up tonight's episode, we want to say thank you for tuning in with us. I say tonight because it is evening here. We want to say thank you for tuning in for another episode. If you have not had an opportunity to rate and review our podcast on any of the major podcast platforms, we would kindly ask you to take 60 seconds, couple minutes to rate and review. That helps us really get this content out to more married couples in the marriage space. So we do thank you for doing that. Thank you for following us on our YouTube channel, all of our social media stuff. We do appreciate the engagement that you're giving us there as well. So like always, we pray that you would experience
God's favor
on your forever.